All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Now That's Debatable. We are live. Gio, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. I think it's going to be a little bit different today, but that's okay. We're going to try things with a new software. Hopefully, our sound is good. Hopefully, you guys can see an image right now. Usually, we do things a little bit differently, and I have a welcoming page, but we're trying new software and trying to stream to multiple places at once. And getting this set up took me a little more time than I thought. Ended up having to work today, so I didn't have as much time to work on it as I wanted. Hopefully, we're live on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time right now. And if that's the case and you're on any of them, it should come up on the screen if anyone says anything in any of those chats. With that in mind, the other thing we're going to be doing different today is not necessarily a reaction video, but kind of a deconstruction video of a topic that Geo originally recommended, and I was a little hesitant on. And then I found a Matt Walsh video that discussed the same topic, which is the decline of religion in America. And although we have done religion before, and we'll probably do it again in the future, something that we would like everyone to know who's watching is that it's not going to be strictly a religious channel for the Now That's Debatable. None of them will be. We're open to discuss as many of those things as possible. So, um, if you have a suggestion, topic recommendation, just let us know. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get on with it. Geo, do you want to add anything?
No, it's just well, call in. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your opinion, what you got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do. On the screen right now, the chat is up. I'm gonna see if I can add our phone number real quick. That way, everybody has it.
I'm not saying anything on Facebook. I see the live feed, but I can hear it as well. But it's totally black,
Oh, it's a black
just so you
screen
know.
on Facebook.
Yep.
Is it a black screen on Twitch?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
But they can hear, so all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's important. I would like to get this up there so we have the phone number, though. Let's see.
Yep. I see it now. I do see the image.
So you see the image now?
Yep. 202-885-350.
Yep, 202
And
888 That is our live call in number. I'm actually going to blow that up a little bigger just so it's very visible and it's just going to be flashing. Like I said, today's going to be a little bit different, but it should be okay nonetheless. Uh, Text is going to be on the left side, though. If anyone says anything in chat, we should be able to see that as well. It should be live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Nonetheless, without any further ado, let's go ahead and tackle this video. What do you say?
yeah, let's do it.
All right, so if I'm not mistaken, you guys should be able to see the video coming up any second now. And I have the link to the video in the description, so if you want to watch the whole thing, you're welcome to do so. We are going to cut it a few minutes short, and that's because I think he goes pretty off the rails of the original topic.
Yes. Yeah,
If
he
you
does.
want to watch the whole video, you're welcome to do so. The link is in the
Calling
description.
Democrats a religion or whatever.
Yeah, that's something that we will definitely discuss. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start this. If you'd like to pause Geo, just let me know. I will probably pause at the same time you think I should. If I don't, just stop me.
The
Okay.
media has been reporting this week with a certain amount of unsubtle glee that a huge chunk of Americans abandoned their religion over the last 2 years, accelerating an already existing trend. This trend is certainly important. It's one of the most important and consequential things happening in our world today. In fact, our society is being fundamentally reshaped as we speak. But as always, the media reports tend to miss the point while also misinterpreting the data. There is a great religious shift taking place. But I don't think it's accurate to say that all of these people are leaving religion necessarily. And I'll explain why. But first, let's take a look at the findings. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, it says, quote, religious affiliation in the U.S. has continued to fall during the pandemic, according to a new survey from the Pew Research Center. The percentage of Americans who identify as Christians now stands at 63%, down from 65% in 2019 and from 78% in 2007. Meanwhile, 29% of Americans now identify as having no religion, up from 26% in 2019 and 16% in 2007 when Pew began tracking religious identity. Many places of worship closed during the pandemic, some voluntarily, others as a result of state and local social distancing rules, and in-person church attendance is roughly 30 to 50% lower than it was before the pandemic. Estimates Barna Group, a research firm that studies faith in the U.S. Millions of Americans move to worshiping online, and questions linger about how many will come back to the in-person worshiping. So let's pause.
We are going to pause exactly right there. And the reason for that is just real quick, is if you'd like to look into this, all you have to do is just Google Pew Report. It is the company that put out this original post. I will try to go back if I can remember and either comment or include the link to the actual numbers for this. But Geo actually sent me this article a couple weeks ago, and we've actually been discussing the possibility of taking it and looking at it as a debate topic. We don't want to seem like we're stuck on religion, but it seemed like a good one and a good fit and something we can knock out this week, so we're going to do it.
Pause for a moment to consider 2 points. First of all, these numbers are indeed truly horrifying if you are a member of a traditional religion. And if you agree with John Adams, who said that our political system was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. You know, if
Can
you
we
do,
stop
then
him right
this
there?
should trouble you greatly.
Sure.
So I thought it was interesting that a quote he pulled from John Adams. I mean, we all know like Matt Walsh, he's very religious, but he makes that Matt Walsh, he makes that assertion. He doesn't go into any explanation of it, and that's one thing I don't see why you would. I totally get why you need a moral group of people to, and you need a moral society in order to have a country, but I don't see why it need to be religious. I don't see how that's following. So it makes total sense for me to say, but it'd be difficult to get a group of people to collectively do anything without some sort of morality, right? So think about like if you go into a lot of times you go into a restaurant, you get your food, and then you pay afterwards, right? So you're making the guy who owns the restaurant, he's making an assumption about your morality. He's assuming that you're not going to just eat and dash. You're making an assumption about his that he's not going to poison you, right? So society needs that mutual trust in order to exist, and so would a government. But he goes on to say not just morality, but also religion. I just don't see why that's necessary.
Yeah, and I think just to give my 2 cents, at least on the argument he's trying to use, at least what I think he's trying to use, is essentially that he's pointing to the fact that John Adams was religious. And
Yeah.
because John Adams is religious, I think he relates to it later, and we'll get to that in a couple minutes, but he points to later saying that our founding fathers were not only religious, but they were Christian. And
Hmm.
I think we can dive into that a little deeper in a couple minutes when he says it.
Yeah.
But there's a few things we would want to talk about when that's said. And I would just start here by saying that Christians now and Christians as little as 5 years ago probably looked at certain things differently than they do to Christians now. But Christians now, compared to Christians in 1770, probably looked at things a lot differently.
Well, yeah,
So,
sure.
just a thought on when looking at what your average modern Christian might perceive versus what your average founding father might perceive as their religion and or Christianity.
Yeah, like for instance, like now, slavery is universally condemned, right? But
Yeah, I would say that's a
most
pretty big
form
one.
most forms
Whereas
of
in
misogyny.
1770, the slaves had been in America for at least 100 years,
Yeah.
almost 150 years at the time. And John Adams, if I'm not mistaken, was a slave owner. George Washington definitely was. And both of them identified as religious, and John Adams specifically identified as Christian. So I think Washington would have said he's maybe a theist. I know Jefferson would probably identify as a deist,
Yeah.
but nonetheless,
It just even the principles that were used to build to construct the Constitution. I mean, they mostly come from Enlightenment era thinking. I just don't see the religious aspect of it. But yeah, we can dive further into that later.
yeah, absolutely.
Dropping from 78% Christian to 63% in less than 15 years is cataclysmic. Even more so when you take a step back and consider the fuller picture. Polls of this kind conducted back, say, in the 1950s would have found that well over 90% of the country was Christian. Oh, that's almost everybody.
And again, that just kind of goes to play into what we were just talking about. How, as in the 1950s, people's ideas were a bit different than today. And I'm not
They
saying
were
everyone
he
should
say
be
90%.
progressive.
Christian?
Yeah, he would say probably 90%. Now, he made that number up. So
Yeah.
let's get that clear right away.
I couldn't find that stat, but to me, honestly, that would speak volumes about Christianity, in my opinion. I mean, you think so? 90% of the country's Christian under Jim Crow. You know, you got
Yeah.
people getting hanged every other day, right? Gay people being, kidnapped, hunted, and tortured. I mean, that's interesting. But okay, we can go.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I figured would come up almost immediately when he mentioned the 1950s. Obviously, if we push back further into like the 1700s, before 1865 and the Civil War, there was not even an average talk of eradicating slavery in the United States. So it just goes to me to point that it may not be the best side to take to say we're all Christian, but we're all slave owners.
Right?
Like don't necessarily want to make that comparison, but that's just me. Let me see if I can get this. All right, let's go ahead and continue on this.
Now and certainly, 90% Christian, and then the rest would be other religions. There'd be almost nobody who identified as non-religious. Now we're on track as Christians.
And again, I think he made up all of those numbers. And
Yeah, I can't find them.
Yeah, I will say
I wish
recently.
he showed his sources.
Not necessarily really recently, but I'll say over the past 30-ish years, it's become less of a stigma to be called an atheist or an agnostic or a non-religious person in America, especially moving towards like the South. I'll generalize there because there's a reason it's called the Bible Belt. And I've been there. I lived there for years.
Grew up
I don't
there.
I don't live there anymore, but I can tell you there is a stigma around atheism, agnosticism, basically anything non-religion and almost non-Christian. So it'd be weird to say that now, but maybe 50 years ago. But again, I think he's just making up these numbers. So, with that in mind, we'll continue.
Christians to be a minority. And that will happen far sooner than you think. I would give it maybe until the middle of this decade, another 5 years perhaps. Of course, we're already a minority and have been for some time if you take into account that not every self-identified Christian is really a Christian. That's the problem with a survey like this. You know, you're not going to find anyone who self-identifies as non-Christian and yet actually is Christian. That doesn't happen. The Christian religion is such that if you think you aren't in it, then you aren't. But just because you think you are in it doesn't mean you are. Case in point, Joe Biden, if he was contacted for this survey, he would have said, yeah, I'm Christian, but he rejects nearly every moral teaching of the Catholic Church and denies.
So I don't even want to give my opinion on Joe Biden's religion. I don't know. I haven't researched it, and I quite frankly don't care. But I will say that given both of our histories, it seems to me that he's making a very bold claim here by saying he's kind of saying if you are unsure of how you feel about Christianity, then you're definitely not a Christian, and there's no hope for you. At least that's just the vibe I'm getting. And if anyone is a fan of Matt Walsh that's watching, or if anyone watches this and you know what he meant by that, or if Matt Walsh watches this for whatever reason, and you'd like to clarify, I'd love to know. It just seems quite, I'll use the term judgmental, to presume that people that are either wavering in their belief or has questions about what they were taught or what they now or currently believe, to just dismiss them out of hand. But that's me.
Yeah, I agree. What is he? Is he Catholic or Matt Walsh?
I don't know. I think he just identifies as Christian. I have no idea what his denomination is. If he is a denomination, I wouldn't know it. If anyone in chat is watching and they know, shout it out or let us know.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, if you would like to defend that statement, you're more than welcome to. I just thought it a little judgmental, but
its moral authority and yet would call himself Catholic and thus Christian. He's not. His claim is at best self-delusion, but probably more likely a conscious lie. All of that to say,
Whoa.
Let's not engage in self-delusion ourselves and pretend that these kinds of survey findings aren't important or that the situation isn't really as bad as this makes it seem. It is that bad, and in fact, it's worse. We were once a Christian nation.
So
I knew you were going to stop there.
yeah, so let's get the chat back and the phone number up. If anyone's watching and you just saw that and you agree with that statement and you'd like to defend that statement, now is your chance. I will give you all the time for the rest of this show to call and defend that statement.
Yep,
Not because
right now you got
I'm
40 minutes.
not that I'm necessarily that ignorant about the topic. It's just that I'm not even a huge fan of history. It's just I've done enough research and enough history research in my years to really, really thoroughly discuss this topic. So if you want to call in and discuss Matt Walsh's statement that we are no longer a Christian nation, but we were founded as a Christian nation with the intent of being a Christian nation, now is your chance. Please call in. Because this is my bread and butter.
I like to read Article 11, Treaty of Tripoli.
Sure.
And this was signed into law in 1796 under George Washington.
Okay.
It says, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on a Christian religion, as it has in itself no character, enmity against the lost religion, or tranquility of Muslims. And as the said states never enter into any war or act of hostility against the Muslim nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinion shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. So there's Article 11 from the U.S. Treaty that was signed with Tripoli.
Yeah, and that was George Washington, which, if it was,
Yes,
what year did you say that was?
1796.
1796. So Washington wasn't president any longer. Um,
Okay.
this would have been
Oh, that
John
was John
Adams.
Adams. That
Yep.
was John Adams, the guy who said it was founded on the Christian nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So Washington, who was the first and unanimous decision for president of the United States, clearly stated in 1796 during John Adams' presidency that we weren't intentionally designed to be a Christian nation. I guess if you want to go against the primary founding father that nearly
you,
everyone everywhere can recognize in America,
you
go for it.
you know, you know what? I think these discussions, when people talk about whether or not the United States is a Christian nation, what tends to get looked over as what's meant by the term. So if you mean Christian nation as in that is the dominant religion that is was practiced by most religious people in the United States, then sure, right? But if you mean that it is a Christian nation in the same sense that Iran or Saudi Arabia are Muslim nations, then that that's total nonsense, right? So when you look at, like, for instance, like Saudi Arabia, their constitution like is the Quran, right? Iran, it's called the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? And they have this role there called the Ayatollah, who's there to maintain the Islamic integrity of the country. There is nothing like that in any sense here in the United States. As a matter of fact, it seemed like that was something that the founders wanted to avoid. They may have had their personal opinions that they they voiced outside of their official capacity, like in their, in their privately, that they said, hey, we're privately we practice Christianity, but to say that was the goal of the United States as a whole, I think that's total nonsense.
Yeah, and one other really quick thing, just to kind of piggyback on that and delve into this, which is why I said if anyone wants to defend this, you have your chance, because I am probably as well versed as I want to be on the topic. And a lot of people don't remember or know or care about this because most people think that the history of America starts with the Pilgrims. And then anything they know of America before that was 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue and never stepped foot in North America. Although that's the story they get told, that's essentially what you need to remember is Columbus never stepped foot in North America. He landed in San Salvador in Central America. But more importantly, we also forget about St. Augustine, Florida, which was established by Spain. It beat any British colony and/or civilization and/or settlement by a couple hundred years, and it was primarily Catholic. And then the people that were here before that were Native Americans, and they had no idea what Christianity was. And if you're talking about the British colonies, most of those people left the Church of England due to religious oppression, and then they went to a Dutch province for a couple of years, about 20, 25, and then they moved to Jamestown, and then that disappeared, and then we have Plymouth Rock with the Pilgrims. So you have Catholicism and agnosticism and leaving the British Church of England, and then establishment of two colonies before Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims for a couple hundred years on top of a already existing people group known as Native Americans that had their own religion and had never heard of Christianity. So if you can point to any point in time during that in which we were supposed to be Christian, that'd be great, but I just don't see it. I just
Yeah,
don't.
even a lot of the foundational principles that you see in the Constitution, for instance, the separation of powers. Right? I don't see that being pulled from any part of Christianity or even in the Bible. I'm We could save the Bible and government for a later podcast, but you know, you look throughout scripture and the way the governments are designed, and particularly in the Old Testament, they're all centralized. You have a
Yeah.
king with the power that can do literally anything.
Yeah, I mean, before the first
No.
government in the Old Testament, there was a theocracy, which was the king,
Yeah.
quote unquote, God being in charge of everything. And then
Yeah, like
when the people said they
you know,
wanted a actual government run by people, uh, the Bible
you
says
know what
God
was
gave
interesting
them
to
a
me?
king. So you
So
have a monarchy.
like after the thing about after Solomon died, the Israel, um, Judea and Benjamin split from the other 10 northern tribes, right? And if you look at the history of the kings afterwards, whenever the king if they had a bad king, the whole nation would suffer. Like a bad king would come in, and this is usually Judea and Benjamin. They had some really good kings, right? They had a few bad ones, but the 10 northern tribes, just about all their kings were bad, right? And they would come in and change the religion, and then God would punish them. Then they go into captivity, and then they might repent, and then the king come back in and change the religion and start worshiping the pagan gods or whatever, and get punished. And I'm reading this, and I'm like, how about like some checks and balances here? Why in the world
I
are we
mean,
giving the king so much authority?
yeah. So I mean,
Why
that's
don't we
where like
change that?
although
And
there
it never
undoubtedly
happens. It's
there are undoubtedly issues with the government that we have today. I mean, the separation of powers, such as the executive versus judicial branches, and like the three branches of government that we currently have,
yeah,
definitely give it more balance than something like a monarchy.
yeah. I'm just like you read it. It's just a series of government mulligans over and over again that are never corrected.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I mean, to say that it's built on the Christian principles, to me, is just silly.
All right. Well, let's keep on going. No one called in or chatted to say otherwise, so maybe we'll get some comments after the fact. But
We are no longer a Christian nation. Soon we won't even be a majority Christian nation. And as our founders knew, this doesn't work. It's not working. The country doesn't work when it is not anchored in the Christian faith.
I think you already nailed this one with the quote from Article 11 in George Washington. And I think most people have a little bit of disillusion to the idea of what a Christian nation means and what our founding fathers intended. And I think Matt Walsh is giving a perfectly good example of that right now.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of times when you're saying like the nation wouldn't work unless it's Christian. Sometimes they might be using that synonymously with moral, and that's a huge mistake.
Yeah,
Of,
I
of,
mean,
of course, of course, you're going to need morals for a society. You need mutual trust, which is built on assumptions about people's morals. But the religious aspect, that's that's what needs to be defended, and I don't see him do that at all.
Yeah, me either. I think this is a perfect example of people misappropriating A, what the founding fathers probably even believed, and B, what they meant. Because the minimal education they get on founding fathers and their religion typically is they believed in God. They left England to pursue Christianity, and that's the end of it. And almost both of those statements are complete lies. Then that's pretty much the only education you get. So it's a little tough. I'll just leave it at that.
Another point, church attendance is perhaps, as it says, 50% lower than it was 2 years ago. So churches lost half of their congregations in the span of 2 years. And they're not coming back, okay? And this squares with my own anecdotal experience for what it's worth. Every church I've attended over the last year has been relatively sparse in attendance. I'm not sure I've seen a full church except on holidays since 2019. And even back then, it was somewhat rare to see a totally full church. Now you just never see them. Why? I mean, why have people abandoned going to church? Part of it, of course, is...
I mean, just a quick interruption here. It's not that important. It's just that pre-COVID, before regulations and safety standards were applied to help keep the public safe and to help slow the spread of COVID-19, things like mega churches existed, and they still exist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just Google Joel Osteen's average church attendance in 2018. Like, it's not a hard thing to look up. I mean, some of the busiest and largest buildings in the world, like Joel Osteen's church, was one of the most attended buildings in the world.
Yeah, he seems to be a little more focused on some news article that he claims he saw that was saying that the attendance that most of this happened in the past 2 years, and I hadn't seen that article that was just focused on the past 2 years, but a lot of that can be explained just through COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and not to say that
and so
like something like COVID doesn't impact physical church attendance. Obviously it will,
yeah,
because safety
and
regulations, we want to keep people alive during COVID, because if you're dead, you can't attend church. But
yeah, that's definitely not the focus of the study, though.
agreed. The Pew Forum, which I said I think I'll try to link to, is not talking about church attendance during COVID. It's talking about
Yeah,
the decline of like his video title
like
is
since like
correct.
2007, I think.
Yeah, his video title is correct. It just seems like he's focusing on part of an article
Yeah.
that happens to mention church attendance and COVID. So,
Hmm.
just wanted to clarify. This is the span of 10 plus years. I think the original study that was put out by Pew Forum started in 2005 or so, and then
Hmm.
it's been doing it pretty consistently every year until now. And then they put out this year and they were like, oh, here's the numbers for this year and COVID.
is the decline in traditional religiosity, the decline in Christian affiliation generally, but the drop-off for church attendance is far outpacing the drop in Christian affiliation. Why is that? A big part of the reason for that is that many churches, most, I'm guessing, closed their doors often for months at a time during the pandemic, during a time when people most needed spiritual guidance and spiritual formation and leadership.
Do you want to add anything there? I feel like I'm saying a lot, but
Well, no, I mean, I think it's interesting that he's criticizing the churches for you know being concerned about people's health. Like,
yeah,
sure, they close their doors and stuff, and like I get it. He believes that they needed spiritual direction now more than ever, but there's no reason why you couldn't get that virtually.
yeah, and I mean
Especially
even
we have like a lot of these older churches, like my family and my dad's side of the family. But most of them go to this church in DC, and there's a lot of older people. Most of those people are at risk. And
Yeah,
To
and I
me,
mean,
it makes perfect sense.
if you're
To
seeking out
be
guidance
concerned
or
about
help or
that.
whatnot, I mean, even if you're an older person that's not very familiar with technology, a phone call is fine. You know,
Yeah, they got
and I'm
cassette
not.
tapes.
Yeah, cassette tapes,
Right.
CDs, VCRs, DVD players, like things that have been around for 30 years that they're
Mhm.
familiar with. You can still seek out advice or your own thing during a
You know,
pandemic.
this is some of that blending of Christianity with conservatism that we were talking about a few weeks ago. How sometimes people tend to conflate the two.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of big what's happening here, but
Yeah.
just my 2 cents.
The church wasn't there. It had fled in the night in fear. Now you might rationalize that churches were forced to do this. The government told them they had to close down. The problem is that many remained closed even when they no longer had to be closed. And even during the time when they had to be closed, they can still be faulted for complying with these absurdly unconstitutional edicts. Closing down the right to the free exercise of religion is right there in the First Amendment. Governments coming in and shutting down churches.
I mean, the one thing I want to add here, at least if anyone is just watching and wants to chip in on that, but one thing I want to make very clear is that the First Amendment is not specifically directed toward Christianity. Also, there's articles in the First Amendment, well, not the First Amendment, but articles in the Constitution and articles in other documents throughout American history that have indicated things for like public safety and public health. And even if there weren't, given that COVID has killed quite a few people in its time and our knowledge, it's probably best to observe some of these guidelines anyway, even if you weren't
Hmm.
necessarily forced. So I think he may be kind of trying to pin this on the government, where it may have just been churches trying to be considerate for some of their members and some of their
Yeah.
elderly
He
citizens. Like he's pointing out
he
like the government's at fault here, but not really.
he uses the term ran in fear. I think that's what he said.
Yeah, cower in fear
Or
and fled in
cower
the
in
night.
fear.
He said they
No,
fled
I
in the
mean,
night. That was his
what
exact
about
words.
being concerned about people's health? You know.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like it to me, it seems that if I were part of a church community and like knowing what I know about how COVID has spread and how many people it's killed because it's impacted people I know, people in my family have had it, people in my family have had residual effects from it. My roommate's uncle just passed away from it not long ago. It, it's not good, and I wouldn't want, even though I'm fairly healthy and fairly young compared to people that are more at risk for getting COVID and having major health problems from COVID. I wouldn't want to potentially put those people at risk by inserting myself into their life. And
Yeah.
that's where, like, it seems that he's kind of ignoring or passing the buck to the government. He's probably not that much older than I am. Or he may even be the same age or a year or two younger. I have no idea. But it's like he's ignoring other people's health by saying that. Because I'm not going to get COVID because I'm young and healthy, so I can go to church. Well, what about those older people that had lung conditions and previous health conditions and are at extremely greater risk than you are? Are you willing to put that person's health in line and at risk to soothe your own ego? Like, it seems silly to me. And it seems that he's just passing the buck instead of like just saying, hey, we're also concerned about people's health.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it sounds more like an afterthought rather than a genuine concern.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's just trying to pin the government on just decent safety regulation that probably wasn't implemented to a good degree because people are still dying from COVID.
Indefinitely certainly flies in the face of that. So the government had no moral authority to shut down any churches, which means the churches had the moral authority to refuse and say, we're not shutting down. You can arrest us all. We're not shutting down. A few churches did that heroically. Most did not. Most just shut their doors and said, okay, you let us know when we can go back to practicing our religion again. So,
Yeah, you see that statement right there is what makes me think he's just trying to pin the blame somewhere else. Because
Yeah, he's
equating
practicing
going to church
Christianity
and
with going to church.
Exactly. That's exactly what he just did. Took the words right out of my mouth.
So through this mixture of compliance and willful cooperation, churches sent a message to the public. And the message was, you don't need us. We aren't necessary. You can get along fine without us. And great numbers of people heard that message and they took it to heart. And now here we are. But there's another very important point to make about all this. But first, let's go back to the article for a minute. It says, among the 29% who say they have no religion, 4% say they are theists and 5% agnostic. Most of those figures are unchanged since 2017. The percentage of Americans who identify as...
Yeah, you see, like right there, he just mentioned that in that article, it says that most of those numbers are changed since 2017. So he's literally cherry picking data when it suits his agenda. And then, like those numbers, if those numbers didn't change, just because people aren't going to church during COVID doesn't mean they've abandoned their religion.
Right. Yeah.
So that's just my quick observation there.
As nothing in particular grew from 16% in 2017 to 20% this year. Though some who identify as nothing in particular may believe in God, Mr. Smith said they are far less likely to pray or attend services than Americans who identify with a religious group. The share of Americans who pray daily fell to 45% in 2021 compared with 58% in 2007. It says the secularizing trends that have been evident for a long time show no signs of slowing and certainly no signs of reversing. Though Protestants remain the largest group, most of the drop in religious affiliation has come from their ranks. Some 40% of Americans now identify as Protestant, compared with 43% in 2019 and 52% in 2007. Okay, now to the important point. What we're witnessing is not really a decline in religion per se. At least the decline is not nearly as steep as those numbers make it seem. Because many of the non-religious people have not given up on religion or left religion. They have just, in fact, changed religions. This is a religious shift, not a drop. And to understand this, we have to take a step back, I think, and consider what we even mean when we say the word religion. What is a religion? Most dictionary definitions will tell you that a religion is, a belief in some kind of supernatural entity with associated rituals and customs attached to that belief. And that is one form that religion takes, yes. Most of the ancient religions, the traditional religions, take exactly that form. But I think I prefer a broader definition that helps to make sense of what we're seeing in our culture today.
Yeah, he does that all, and he's about to do that, and you're going to see why very shortly. But I do want to acknowledge and admonish this. That's a fairly good definition of religion, because I think he just Googled religion and read off the exact definition that Google says. Because when you just Google it, that's almost verbatim to how Google
I had it pulled up as well.
Yeah, so if you just Google it, it's almost verbatim to how you define it. And I don't really see much of a need to change that around. I don't think it's missing too much. And I think
he's going to do that.
Yeah, I think broadly most people would define this.
Yeah. Like when if you say you don't have a religion, and he'll assert, yes, you do, and then they ask you, do you believe such and such, or what do you believe on whatever, and you state your belief. That's your religion.
Yeah,
That's like a bait and switch.
A lot of times the bait and switch comes when you talk to someone that's agnostic or atheist, and they're like, well, why don't you believe in God? And you say, well, I'm like, I don't see good reason. And they're like, oh, so you trust reason. Reason is your God.
That's your religion. That's your God.
Yeah, that's just, it's a very silly argument for anyone to try to make. And please don't do it. That's not what we're here for. If that's what you want to call in and say, as much as I want to have your call, it's going to be silly, and it's easily just refuted. It's not a religion. Reason is not a religion. Uh, just because I have a belief in something doesn't mean it's a religion. That's it, plain and simple.
Yeah.
I believe the Earth is round based off of evidence across the world and across the globe, quite literally globe, that the Earth is indeed round. That is by no means a religion. Don't equate
Yeah.
beliefs and religion. They're not the same.
I would say that religion can be defined as simply a shared sense of transcendent meaning. And it has to be shared because religion, by definition, cannot be a totally individualized pursuit. If it is, then it's just a belief, not a religion.
I would disagree with that, at least to an extent. And I say that because at some point in time there was genuinely only one of a particular type of religion, and I'll give one that's very specific because it's very modern, and that's Scientology.
Mhm.
And so if you haven't looked into the origin of Scientology, then at some point in time there was only one believer in Scientology, and then he wrote a book about it, and other people started agreeing with this sentiment. And Scientology, probably acknowledged by Matt Walsh, is defined as a religion. But at some point, only one person believed it. And it seems that since there are things like different versions of the Bible and different sects of Christianity, people have their individual views about what Christianity is. That doesn't make it not Christianity or not a religion. Just because they have a very specific viewpoint on it, that it just kind of begs the question, or kind of like passes the buck here, and I just don't like it. But
And then there has to be that sense of transcendence, or else it's not a religion, it's a social club. To be in a religion is to look towards something transcendent, something beyond ordinary physical experience, and to be standing alongside others who are looking in the same direction as you. Now, this means, again, that some of those self-described Christians aren't really Christian at all, aren't really religious at all. Because when you go to some churches today, there is no sense of anything transcendent at all. Everything is earthbound. All of the focus is on earthly priorities and values. I mean, you can go to some so-called churches today and not even see a cross anywhere in the building. Because the cross is transcendence. And in these churches, they don't want you looking to anything transcendent. And the people in those churches, they're not attending a church, they're attending a motivational seminar. Or maybe a book club. In fact, many Christian churches have taken great pains over the decades to deliberately turn away from the transcendent and the mystical, and to make the church-going experience far more sterile and sanitized in that way. Which is another reason why fewer people are going to church, because you've removed the very thing that motivated them to come in the first place. But what about all those
can we start with that?
self-described non-religious people?
I mean, shouldn't the thing that motivate them be Jesus, not some, I guess, not catering to people's emotions? Because it sounds like he's describing like some sort of like dry version of Christianity.
yeah, so I'll speak a little bit from personal experience here, and I think he has another video specifically dedicated to the topic, but we may potentially tackle that in the future if people like the way this video worked and whatnot. Obviously, we're still ironing out all our details, and we're trying to do software and stuff today, but something that he really leans to, at least from what I've seen of him and his beliefs, is that without religion, and specifically Christianity, you get no community. And he feels strongly, I believe, that that is a good reason to continue being a Christian. And I think what you just said makes a lot of sense, at least as far as what I know of religion and Christianity, is that if you are a Christian, it should be about Jesus and Christianity. It shouldn't be about how many people are in your church.
Yeah,
Or how many
community
people-
is the
yeah.
way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through community, right? Yeah.
Looks like VYN. FYI. I don't know what VYN is, but that seems like Cyrillic, which is the Russian alphabet. So anyway, if someone's watching on YouTube, I unfortunately don't know what you mean by that. Nonetheless, yeah, I agree completely, and I think that's just not a good reason. If you're going to church because you need community, then just join a social club, like you just said. You don't need to also have religion just because you want community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yep.
People. Those allegedly non-religious people. Well, a good portion of them are leftists. Not all, but a good portion. And leftism is a religion in itself.
And that's it. that's the end of this video.
You don't want to tackle that last part?
I want to tackle it. I just don't want to continue the video.
Okay.
And I'll give my reason for that, and you're more than welcome to have your opposition to me stopping the video there. It is indeed biased, and it's my bias. I admit to it. I am aware of it. I'm aware that I am a little bit cherry picking here because I don't want to listen to the rest of this video. But in the fairest way I can, I'm letting you know
It was hard to listen to.
There's more to the video. There's another 3 minutes and almost 4 minutes left. And I have included a link to his video, and I have had the full title of his video up for most of the stream. If you would like to watch the rest of it, you're welcome to do so. However, I'm going to stop listening there because he goes really off the rails. And when I say he goes really off the rails, he starts making assertions left and right, just straight accusations that have essentially a conservative overtone, but a rightist viewpoint. At least in my opinion, and if you have a different opinion on the rest of that video, you're welcome to argue with me. That's the whole point of this. But
even with, I like the part when he goes into, he talks about trans women and trans men. He says that's the like a trans man is short for transcendent man.
Yeah. So
He's like,
literally says later in the video, like a minute and a half from now, that in the word trans, when referring to a transgender person, is not transgender, but instead transcendent, as in they are a deity of their own being. And to me, that's just such a silly thing that I didn't want to bother. And if anyone is really, really excited about this video and happens to watch this, I saw it has 3,500 likes on YouTube. Call and debate. Give a comment in our YouTube section and we'll comment back. Watch the show next time, next Tuesday. We're going to be doing a different show. Call in, argue, make your point. Let your voice be heard. But don't start equating left-leaning, right-leaning, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, Independent, etc. as religion. It's not.
Yeah,
it's a political stance.
Yes, it's insulting, it's dishonest, and it doesn't lead to genuine discussion. Because
it doesn't.
Instead of saying, "Hey, this is an opinion that you may have or may not have put a lot of thought into, and so let's discuss." You're just dismissing it as a dogma,
right? And I think that's like one of the things that crushes and kind of goes against everything that this channel is made for. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. This channel was made with one really big thing in mind, and that's to promote critical thinking. And I'm more than welcome to have anyone with anyone's opinion come on and say what they want to say and give their 2 cents. That's why our little tagline is "Let your voice be heard." But if you're of the opinion that calling someone's political beliefs a religion is okay or good, or that's something you personally do, please take a step back and critically think about it. Because if I said the opposite of what Matt Walsh just said, which I'm going to say up front, I do not believe, but if I said that right-wing political advocates, their only reason they're white ring is because they're religious. If I said that, and I said that right wing is its own religion,
Own heresies, such as criticizing America in any way,
yeah,
criticizing burning a flag, or
yeah. If I said
whatever.
like being
Not
like
voting for Trump.
anti-liberal was a dogma, you would probably immediately withdraw from that if that's your current opinion. So I just want to kind of get you to see the other side of what he's saying here. Leftism is by no means a religion, although, like, politically, I'm kind of indifferent. I would never recognize leftism or right-wing people as a religion as a whole in and of itself. It's just silly. It doesn't promote me to think about them as anything other than someone who's brainwashed. Because saying that it's a religion and saying that a political belief or a particular stance on a topic that has nothing to do with religion is in and of itself a religion is ludicrous. It's just ludicrous.
Nothing but agreement from me.
Yeah, so this one was a little different. We may do more videos like this in the future. Hopefully we'll have a little more notice. We're going to try sticking to Tuesdays from now on, so we're going to start putting out a schedule. But with that in mind, we may do more, not necessarily reaction videos, but just kind of breaking down arguments like we did with this Matt Walsh video. If that's something that our viewers like and respond to well and want to see more of, or send recommendations for videos for us to do this to, or give us one in chat or a comment, etc., that's fine. We can do that. We'll gladly take those on. Doesn't really matter the topic. Doesn't have to be Matt Walsh by any means. Can be on any topic. That's the whole thing. We want to let your voice be heard. We also want to be active critical thinkers. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Gio, before we take off today?
No, if you was listening live and you wanted to call in, why didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see you
We
next
want to
week,
hear your voice.
next
We want
Tuesday.
to talk to you.
But we want to try to put out a little more warning next time. We'll have a topic release. Should be live in all 3 places as well next time as well. And then we'll go from there and see how things go. If you have any feedback or questions, concerns, let us know. Thanks for watching.